1950s, the Canadian government contracted the company AV-RO to build a stealth interceptor jet called the Avro Arrow. It was widely considered to be one of, if not the best in its class in the world. Costing around 2.2 billion Canadian dollars in today's money, the Arrow had been the single most expensive R&D project in Canadian history, and it put Canada on the map in the global aerospace industry. But there was no one to sell it to. The American and the British militaries wanted to produce their own jets. And in fact, America turned around and said, hey, why don't you buy our jets instead? In the most controversial move of his career, Prime Minister John Diefenbaker fell in line with American defense policy. He cancelled the project, ordered all prototypes destroyed, and left 14,000 Canadians unemployed. Although you can argue over the merits of the Avro Arrow itself, the real failure here was that the government refused to support a transition for the facility it had already spent millions on. A facility that could have been converted to civilian aircraft and given Canada its own equivalent to Boeing. It's ironic that Diefenbaker is remembered for capitulating to American influence. Just days before the election that made him Prime Minister, Diefenbaker had declared that if the Liberals were re-elected, quote, Canada will become a virtual 49th economic state in the American Union. You see, anti-Americanism never truly disappears in Canada, but rather it comes in waves. The stretch of time bookended by the two world wars was a notable period of cooperation between the two nations. But now in the era of the Cold War, Canadians were becoming uncomfortable with the idea that they were simply a sidekick to the US. 1956 saw the government release the results of the Gordon Commission, an economic panel which had spent the last year researching the rapid Americanization of Canada. First, there was culture. By the mid-1950s, 80% of magazine sales were from American brands. Canadian newspapers were still Canadian-owned, but any international coverage was usually borrowed from American papers. The Canadian film industry was almost entirely non-existent. Even if we did have films to show, film distribution was owned entirely by Hollywood, and they had no interest in showing Canadian films. Even our education system tended to be biased towards America.